everybody. I'm Meghan Gardner from Cultura Connector, and I'm here to talk to you about how to be a cultural educator, how to get found and hired. And so to start, I'm going to first define culture as it pertains to this presentation. So we define culture as a system of values, beliefs, and agreed upon social structure. And for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to divide that into two types, culture and subculture. So first, I get asked a lot by people, well, how could I possibly be an expert on my culture? You're not. Nobody really is. What we are talking about is your lived experience within that culture. Very few cultural educators will actually say they're an expert in their culture because of the amount of diversity that's in their culture. But you can give your lived experience within the culture a voice, and it is a valid voice. So under culture, we have put ethnicity, religion, language. Basically, these are the collective and lived experience of a larger and often recognized group of a governing agency. But then under subculture, it's your neurotype, your physical abilities, your hobbies and interests. This is your lived experience that can be combined with your culture. Now we're going to go through my experience, a little bit of background on myself to kind of help you understand where I came to this point in my life. So since 2001, I've been creating educational story-based adventures, which incorporate STEM into live adventures. To better explain that and help you picture it, I want you to think about a video game without the computers. So if it's a fantastical environment, it would be our story. The kids or adults would be dressed up in costumes. There would be props. They'd be navigating a story arc live in person with our staff and our educators. And then what we did was we added in an extra element of education by having STEM. So, but the STEM is integrated right into the story. And what I mean by that is, let's say we're talking about a wizarding world where there's wizards and warriors and such. What you would have to do is, in order to cast spells, you have to learn physics, because all the spells are actually incorporate physics. In order to be a healer, you have to learn biology, because that's what's necessary for healing the body. And to be an alchemist, you have to learn chemistry. So those are just a few examples. We took this entire model and we integrated it into after-school programs and summer camps, which we now license. And we have attendees from all over the world who fly in for our events and our camps. I've also been consulting in games and education, creating curriculum and adventures and licensed programs. Examples, one of my clients is Royal Caribbean. We design STEM-based adventures on board their ships. I also designed a STEM summer camp for the Princeton Review and other large corporations. However, in 2014, I kind of got bored with the very Eurocentric myths and legends. And so out of my own personal curiosity, I wanted to expand and reach out to the rest of the world's stories, not just staying in that small Eurocentric perspective. So, but I decided, that if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to explore a culture's stories in our adventures, that I didn't feel comfortable just going and reading Wikipedia or even a book. I wanted to actually bring cultural educators and advisors from those cultures on staff for the span of a whole year as we explored those cultures and their stories. So we created cultural adventures and we worked with indigenous people, both Arawak of the Taino down in the Caribbean, as well as Abenaki up in the Algonquin of the northern part of North America, Japanese, Moroccan, Syrian, Bulgarian, and a bunch of other cultures. It's been wonderful. It's been kind of like a world tour of cultures as we create these adventures and we partner with the educators. As part of this, we've been advocating for cultural staff in encouraging not just our organization, but other organizations to hire cultural staff. as contractors, performers, advisors on their projects. And in doing so, we've created quite a global presence. We have global clients and partners in the travel industry, game industry, education, and we have some products being run of our own in England, China, South Korea, Spain, Mexico, and many others. But let's get started with how you can become a cultural educator. So the first thing is to define your client. And that comes from asking yourself a series of questions. This is before you even begin to let people know that you're in the market as a cultural educator. So in your mind, I want you to ask yourself, who is your ideal client? What media, product, or experience do you prefer? Or preferably, do you have experience in? And are you a designer or an artist or a performer? Do you want to be in the entertainment, recreation, or education industries? Do you sell cultural goods? Are you an interpreter or a translator? Examples of some of the different companies that hire cultural educators are Epic Games. They make Minecraft. Nike, Disney, McGraw-Hill, they make textbooks and other books. These are companies that all need cultural advisors, performers, designers, and more. Take a look at, once you figure out who your ideal clients are, look at how they're representing your culture right now. In not just in their products and their services, but also on their website or in their public social media. Find out if they have a DEI department. DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and start there. Your DEI department is probably going to be very receptive to you reaching out and might be able to, at least if they're not interested in having you come talk, they might be able to pass you on to somebody in development who would be interested in talking to you. Are there any upcoming projects that you can partner on? Are they providing services to your culture or to your demographic, and you can help them with that? Who have they hired in the past? If you can find out that they have hired a cultural educator or advisor in the past, look those people up, find out what they did and how it went. What was the public reception of these depictions? And search social media to see if they got any kind of negative responses. Then also find out what their current present image is. Do they publicly support inclusion? What issues have they taken a stand on? Have they made statements or taken action? An example of this would be to look not just on social media, but also at the company's policies. How do they treat their own international staff or staff who come from a specific culture? But when looking on their social media, see how they took specific stands on issues like Black Lives Matter, Indigenous water rights, LGBTQ+. Look for any of these things that also might apply to you, but also are just in general showing their stand on important issues. Next, we're going to go into the types of services that you can provide. So first, I want you to think about what specialties fit you. Are you the type who likes to do presentations or workshops that educate about your culture and raise awareness at, say, universities, libraries, education events, and conferences? And by the way, these can be both online and live. Are you a person who likes to do keynotes or speaking on panels where you share your perspective and your experience? Note these first two have a lot to do with public speaking, which I know some people are just flat out terrified of, and that's okay, because you don't have to just be somebody who's upfront. You can also be more of a behind the scenes type person. So you can try consulting with companies who speak about diversity and representation. You can do performances if you are a performer, or information booths if you want to man an information booth for events or conferences or cultural festivals. Perhaps you're a media creator, such as a filmmaker or a videographer. Maybe you design social media content or photography. So there's a lot of different design types. There's designing such as video game design, product design, sculptures, interior design. All of those you can be pulling from your culture, and that might be of interest with some of these larger companies. Also, if you love writing, maybe you're even published a book yourself or some articles, you could try being a co-author or at least an advisor. So I have this vision of the future that I want to share with you. And that vision is, let's say we have it here in the United States, we have a very popular European American author, and they put out a whole series of books. And now they're going to be writing a book where in this book, there is an African American major character and an Indigenous major character. What I would like to see is on the cover of that book, the title of the book, the author's name, and then underneath it, the name of either co-author, at least advisors, of an Indigenous educator and an African-American educator or advisor, because that would show to the world that this author didn't just go on Wikipedia or wherever to source what it's like to be of that culture. I would actually like to see that they brought in and partnered with people from that culture in the depiction of that culture. And remember, this also pertains to subculture as well. So people with different abilities or hard of hearing or anything like that, if you partner with people with that lived experience, you're going to be able to present a more authentic experience in your media and your books. Maybe you're more of an educator and curriculum design or course design is more your thing. So for education or for training purposes, a DEI department may want to partner with you to create a training course on working with people of your culture. You could be a retailer and you're interested in becoming a supplier for a gift shop or museum in another country. Also, there are researchers who are interested in studying aspects of your cultures. So those are people you could reach out to and possibly partner with. You can look and see which researchers have received which grants and then reach out and say, hey, listen, I'm a cultural advisor. This maybe my experience is of interest to you. There's also translators and interpreters, obviously, but there are a lot of companies that want a global reach for their services and products. And when they're looking to translate, they're looking for a person where that language is their first language. So even though you're working with a company that's based out of the US primarily, if they want to translate something into another language, they're going to be looking for people where that's their first language. They don't want somebody here in the US where English was their first language and their secondary language is what they're translating into. If you're an education center, perhaps you can add in extra revenue by providing consulting services. And if you're a cultural group with a website, you might actually just be the first stop for some media companies that are seeking advisors and performers. Now we're going to go into your marketing. And basically, this is establishing your experience. So first and foremost, videos, photos, samples of your work. I'm just going to put this out there, video rules in marketing. Make it accessible though. So that means translations, subtitles, and alt text. So when you have a photograph, alt text, if you have a photograph on your website, alt text is the text that goes into a section so that when somebody who is vision impaired is surfing your website, their computer is able to translate that text and be able to say, in this picture, you see this. And so that person will have a richer, better experience of your website. And then also when you are in social media and you put a photograph up, take the time to write underneath it in brackets an image description so that people can have that computer software translate what it is they would be looking at. Your website, same as your videos, make it accessible, even if it's one page a day. I have to say right here, I'm doing that myself. I have a very big website, and it is a really big project to go through because this is just something I learned about only recently. And so I instead of trying to do the whole thing all at once, I just make myself a deal. I'd have to do one page a day, go through and start making it more accessible. While you're at it, though, you can also update with your keywords, and I'll go through in a little bit hashtags, but we're going to make sure those keywords also match with your hashtags. Add a blog where it gives you an opportunity to write. A blog, by the way, is a great introductory level book in the making. So if you start your own blog, take a look at possibly accruing enough entries that eventually you have a book. You can also provide resources on your website about your culture and photos. a list of any previous clients that you've worked with, and then, of course, your resume or your experience. Make sure that your contact form is very simple, and also make sure to list your social media on your website. In LinkedIn, highly recommend LinkedIn because it is a global platform. Make a strong profile, and put your website link in there. In your LinkedIn profile, have an introduction to who you are and why someone would want to hire you. So go into detail about, if you're looking to avoid negative press and get positive press because of good representation of a culture, I'm the person to come to. So that's the kind of the approach that you want to make. Also, with your LinkedIn, you can also join groups and you can post articles of interest. And if you can't find a group about your culture, then make one and start inviting people to join you. For social media, in my experience, TikTok is actually one of the champions of cultural educators. Just go on TikTok, type in what your culture is, and I guarantee you'll probably see somebody on TikTok who is making videos about day-to-day life in that culture. On TikTok, also, hashtags are important. I'll go through that in the next one. But also for TikTok, shoot your video off of TikTok. And the reason is that you can then take that video, upload it to TikTok, and then also upload it to Facebook, Instagram, and other formats as well. If you shoot it on TikTok, you won't be able to then download it and put it onto any other of the platforms. There's also Twitter. In my experience, Twitter is best for educating people about statistics. It's also what I call the public contact form for reaching out to other companies. And what I mean by that is you could actually introduce yourself to a company through their website contact form and not receive anything back from them. But if you go on Twitter and you actually ping them on Twitter publicly, you stand a much better chance of them getting back in touch with you. So I'll talk more about how to do that later on. There's also Pinterest, which is much more visual, Tumblr, which is more international, Reddit, great for engaging people, and even WhatsApp. The key thing here to know, though, is that instead of looking for a huge number of followers, what you actually want to look for is the number of interactions. I would much rather have 1,000 followers with a really strong interaction than 10,000 followers with almost no interaction. So consider that. The other thing is, if you're trying to reach out to specific companies and get specific clients, look at what they're using and be on those platforms. Even if those platforms aren't terribly popular in your area, you'll want to get onto those platforms. And every time you post to social media, of course, link your website. Hashtags. Okay, so these are kind of what rules social media. They are what determine not just what people might see because they put in a search on a hashtag, but also what Facebook and TikTok and others think that you might find of interest. So hashtags you might consider using are hashtag cultural ed, hashtag cultural education, hashtag cultural advisor. Then there's also your own specific cultural hashtags. So let's say if I was Taino and I wanted to establish myself as a Taino educator, I could put in hashtag Taino culture, hashtag Taino awareness, hashtag Taino TikTok. That's actually a hashtag, putting TikTok at the end on your TikTok channel, or Instagram, Facebook, etc. So now those can also be used as I mentioned earlier, as keywords on your website, just so that you have some uniformity through everything. Write articles and conduct reviews. Write for local publications and answer questions on places like Reddit. Interview others. And there's two reasons for this. One is, as you begin to interview others, you expand your own network. And that's key, because as you expand your network, you know the people to bring in on a project if that project needs more than just your skill. Also, you're going to, as you might over time run out of your own material, but you can bring in other people who have fresh material and a fresh take. Also, if this person is an influencer and you interview them, they may post it to their own social media. Now you get attention from their followers. A press release. The moment you are hired by a company, please have them, encourage them to put out a press release. Now, what company wouldn't? If they're actually serious about this and they just hired you as a cultural educator, they're telling the world they want to do this right. And so when they write a press release and they promote it and your name's in it, you get all kinds of great attention for that. So, and if they don't, then you write your own press release and you put it out and put it on your website too. Explain why it's important to your client and then promote the heck out of it. Credits. This is key if you're in any kind of media. See if your website can be included, and if you have a company name, get that in there as well. And on directories, get on your directories. And I'm going to go ahead and put mine out there, culturaconnector.net. It is a free directory, free to list, free to search. So please go, if you haven't already, sign up on culturaconnector.net. There's all kinds of really fascinating drop downs you can select from, keywords, so that you're not just promoting that you are an expert in your cultures and your lived experience in your culture, but also in many other aspects of your lived experience. So if you are a former refugee, or if you are a person who is hard of hearing or whatever, all those can be different attributes of lived experience that you can put into this to make it searchable. And also, it's a directory that we're already having inquiries from reporters and other large organizations who want to start using the directory to find people who they can hire on. So please get on Cultura Connector. The other ones are LinkedIn. If you are a guest speaker at a university, sometimes they have directories of guest speakers. And then also make sure you're a part of your local cultural center or group, so that if an inquiry comes to them, they can direct it over to you. Now we're going to go on to lead generation. And what I mean by lead generation is essentially filling your pipeline. This is how to get business and how to be paid as a cultural educator or advisor. So first is be a local resource, in person or online. You can reach more people online, and you can expand your reach. I mean, I'm not sure you want to jump in your car and drive 300 miles to go do a 1-hour speaking engagement, unless it's high profile. So possibly offer to do some virtual presentations. Reach out to teachers at schools and offer to be a guest speaker. Again, they will often take you over Zoom or some other format that's a virtual speaking engagement. And then also belong to that cultural organization or center, especially if they have a directory and a strong presence in the community. Partner on startup projects. Now, this one is where if you're just getting started and there's another company that's just getting started and no one has any revenue to pay anyone, you can partner on a project where, let's say it's an online course, and then they're going to release that course and they're going to sell it. Then you could have an agreement, a written agreement, where the two of you earn whatever the percentage of the revenue is. So this is a way for you to get paid after the fact, but now you have some income coming in, and it's something to go on your resume and your experience. Expand your network online by connecting with DEI departments. I mentioned before, a lot of large companies have those. Go ahead and reach out to them, find out who they are. Also do a search on LinkedIn for Nike DEI and see what comes up. You'll often find that the head of the DEI department is on LinkedIn, because often that's how they network as well. Attend industry events and conferences, even if you're not presenting, and just network. So bring business cards and hand those out. I recommend on your business card, have information on how to contact you. And on the back, have a whole paragraph on why they want to reach out to you. Because, a lot of people will get a business card and they look at it and go, oh, what was this person about? I forget. So have something on the back side of that business card that could be of value for them. When you find somebody who is an offender, so this is that they have depicted your culture inappropriately, or they didn't depict it at all when it was necessary for them to do so. We want to reach out and educate them, but do so in a way that opens the door for them to actually hire you and work with you. It's easier said than done. I know when you see a misrepresentation, the first thing that can feel is anger. And I can only say that is from my own position as a member of specific marginalized culture, is that it makes me upset when I see misrepresentation. So what we want to do instead is reach out to them and offer assistance. So what you can do is, if there's anything that was done well in that media, point it out and say, okay, you did this well. Here's where we can make some changes in the future. Notice I didn't say what they did badly. I said, here's what what you can do in the future. And in educating them politely, respectfully, you are really going far, also in complimenting them on what they did do right. You're going far in getting them to say, oh, look, this person, they're not pissed off at us. They actually want to work with us, and they may reach out to you and say, yes, we're interested in partnering with you. Ask for referrals. If you do successfully land a client, then ask for referrals, especially if they're happy. Ask all the time, because those referrals personal referrals are really good conversion to an actual client. Often governments and NGOs or non-governing organizations will put out grants and bids. And if that happens, you should take a look at what's going on out there. You can go into those portals and do searches for them, but also I highly recommend this really cool function called Google Alerts. And to find out how to set that up, go on Google and type in Google Alerts, and they'll walk you through how to set that up. Google Alerts, what you do is you have certain key terms that you put in, and then Google Alerts will scrape and find any news stories or even websites that pertain to that and send that to you in the form of an email. Subcontracting is a great entry into doing actual government contracts. So when you go on the government contract portal and you find out that there's this contract that pertains to your culture that was awarded, find out who it was awarded to, then go reach out to them and say, hey, I'm of this culture. You might be interested. I have this experience. Can I subcontract with you? Often when a contract is awarded, being able to subcontract to members of that culture, if the award is about a specific culture, is highly desirable. It looks really good for the company that landed the contract. Interact on social media with your followers by asking questions of your followers. Remember, interaction is gold. That's really what we want. And then also you can network on social media with other influencers, especially even influencers who have a higher engagement than you. But to do this, I want you to use something called specific praise. What specific praise means is, instead of just going onto their account and going, good job, and hearts, and love that, find exactly what it is about their post or their article or their the social media video that resonated with you, and when you make that post, give that specific comment, because specificity means you're truly paying attention. When you give specific feedback, you're giving something of value, and they will pay attention. Not maybe right at once, but they will over time. When you keep giving that specific feedback, they're going to take an interest in you. And also, it just pops your name right up there at the top of their awareness, so that when you do reach out and say, hey, let's partner on this, they might be more open to that. Contact local newspapers and reporters to let them know that you're a available resource for stories. A great way to find reporters who might be open to this is to find stories that pertain to not just your culture, but any other culture that a reporter did. Find that reporter on LinkedIn and reach out to them and say, hey, I saw this great piece you did. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot. By the way, if you're ever going to do a piece on this culture, I am a cultural educator or advisor of that culture. Here's my contact information. It's a great way to get to become a resource for reporters, and keep nurturing those relationships over time. Also, partner with researchers and conservation organizations. If they are going to do a research paper or project, you want your name on that final research project. The next we're going to be doing is the interview process. I call this time to talk. So this is where you've actually engaged enough that they want to start talking to you. This could be over Zoom or in person, but this is where we're talking turkey, as we say here in the US. It's about trying to figure out whether or not you have a good fit. So I have a bunch of questions that you can ask them, and you should probably write some of these down. So the first thing and most important question is, what problem can you solve for them? If the problem is very nebulous and hard to pin down, that might be a very difficult project for you. This is even more important. Do they see it as a problem? So if they are misrepresenting your culture and they don't see it as a problem, they're probably not going to pay too much attention. It's possible that you're just being brought on board as like a publicity thing. So you want to make sure they see it as a problem. And then what solution do they expect from you? Open up this dialogue with what I call mutual ignorance. They're ignorant about your culture, and you are ignorant about their goals. Why do they want to work with you, and what do they expect from you? Make sure you can meet those expectations. Anytime you're engaged in them in any kind of dialogue, they're probably going to mess up with some terminology. Again, correct kindly and with understanding. They're often nervous too. And I can tell you, as somebody who works with cultural educators, the first thing I do when I sit down with them is I say, I'm going to mess up because I'm a product of my society and media, and I need you to correct me. And by putting that right out there, I find cultural educators are immediately set at ease, like, okay, I've been given permission to correct Meghan on how to properly portray or what terminology is inappropriate. Now, this is also important, though. If they don't abide by your correction, if they debate it, red flags should start going up, because that means they may be trying to go against you on some of your input. When we brought in cultural educators for our programs, they completely had 100% say in everything that went on. They had to approve all of our props, all of our costumes, our stories, the type of language that we used. We also invited them in, and they portrayed characters in our adventures. But there wasn't a single, if they said this was wrong, it was wrong. That was the amount of autonomy and control that they had over our projects. And as somebody who continues to work with cultural educators, that's what I'm going to ask for you to ask of them, no matter how big they are. If they don't regard your level of authority over this, then they're probably just using you for just to get some publicity. With that in mind, be prepared to walk away. If they don't take your actions seriously and make an effort to change, then it might be time for you to just cut bait and run. I'm sorry, I'm using some lingo here. It might be time for you to stop the discussion and say, I don't think we have a good fit here. What's their budget? I mean, the budget to hire you. Please ask this before you tell them your rate. Especially if you're talking to someone like Disney or a really big company, because you may come right in all excited to be talking to Disney, and you may say, yeah, my rate is $100 an hour. And they're thinking, ooh, we paid our last cultural educator $250 an hour. Okay, that's a line item we don't need to worry about. So don't put your pricing up front. Everything is on per project, and I would highly recommend doing an hourly rate, but I'll get into that later on. How much input will you be providing, and how much authority does your input have? Does your experience match their need? And can you bring in partners if they're needed? So if you are a person who is really educated in the oral history of your culture, but they want musicians, and you know musicians, then you can bring in the musicians and you can be part of that team. So again, that's in part is networking with people of your own culture. Have they worked with a cultural advisor in the past? And if so, who? Can you contact them? And if you can, do so. Find out how it went. If not, did they reach out to other cultural advisors? And what's been the response from those advisors? Who else are you working with? What is their role? Can they overrule your input? And who do they answer to? This is an entire team of people, usually, depending on how big the company is. And if you're not talking directly to the person in charge, the person with the final say, like the director of the film or the writer of the screenplay, then your input may be overruled. So you're going to want to make sure that you interview not just the person you're interviewing, but if they're not the decision maker, you want to go up the chain and talk to the people who are the final decision makers. That's how you're going to find out how serious they are about properly depicting your culture. And next, we're going to talk about terms or terms and conditions. You may hear this lingo called T's and C's, terms and conditions. This is the written legal paperwork on your agreement to work with a company. So now we're down to the last stage, hopefully, before you start working for them. Again, a lot of questions. The first one I have for you, is there a non-disclosure agreement? So non-disclosure, you'll also hear this called an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. A non-disclosure agreement means that you cannot talk about the project until a specific date. Now, usually that date, if it's a film, it will mean you can't talk about it until the film is actually publicly available. But also keep in mind an NDA, though, may have specific coverages that you can talk about the film, but you can't talk about certain parts of the company, the creative process, or people in the company. And those might be like a longer term or what they call evergreen. You can never talk about these types of interactions that you had with the company. When do you get paid and how? My preference, of course, is hourly, but if they want a flat rate because it's a project, then give them a flat rate. But I would recommend saying something like, okay, so it's $2,000 for let's say 20 hours, and it's this much per hour after that. And then make sure that before you begin working, you get a non-refundable deposit. That's so important. You don't want to be chasing after them for your money. They give you the deposit, you start working. When that deposit has been earned, you go on to the next deposit or whatever the next payment is. What are the dates and times you're committing to? And are you available then? That's kind of important. You don't want to be missing out on someone's important wedding day because you're off working with a company. What form of feedback do they expect from you? Is it, if it's written, what form of written feedback? Email? Or are they going to be sharing a document with you? And what platform is that document shared on? If it's in person, well, okay, now we might have some travel time involved. And are you going to have to stay overnight? Is it video chat? So if so, what platform? And consider this, if you are consulting with a company on the other side of the globe, time zone changes. I do consulting in South Korea and Beijing, and that 12 or 13-hour time difference can be kind of tough, especially for the late night meetings for me or early morning meetings for me. Is it in person or remote? Is it a hybrid? I would recommend, if it's in person, charge more for it because you're going to be spending more time traveling and doing consulting. And then less for the latter, which is the remote consultations. Travel expenses, make sure they're covered. You don't want to be footing the bill for those. So make sure they take care of the arrangements on their end. So, and what I mean by that is the hotel and the airfare. For some things like taxis and buses, you can bill them later for that. That tends to be smaller fees. For meals, build those into your cost. So figure out what you would spend on meals for your 3 meals. That's called per diem. That your per diem is how much money you would get to eat for the whole day, and build those into your cost so that you don't have to worry about billing them for your individual meals. What credit do you receive? Where is the credit listed? What is the font size? of your credit. That actually matters. You don't want to be in teeny tiny, hard to read font at the very end of the movie or the book. You want to make sure that you have a good representation. And is it just your name, or is it your website also? And last but not least, unfortunately, this is sometimes necessary, have an exit clause. An exit clause is where you just don't think you're into it, you're on your way through it, and they're just not paying attention to the advice you're giving, to the recommendations. You feel like you really don't want your name on this project. You need to have an exit clause in place. Trust me, by the way, they have an exit clause around you and terminating the contract with you. You want also to represent you so that you can get out if they don't fulfill their end of the agreement. So now it's just time for a conclusion. Let's sum up the presentation with the most important points, and then I will take some questions if there are any. So first, as a reminder, define your client before you even begin doing your marketing, because defining your client helps you determine what your marketing is going to look like. How do they represent your culture and other cultures right now? What are the services you're going to provide? What's your specialty? Do you have partners who you can bring on for additional projects that may have expertise that are beyond yours? In your marketing, make sure you have a strong website that is accessible and a good LinkedIn profile with a social media presence. For lead generation, remember that when you reach out to a company that does something that's misrepresentation or lack of representation, educate politely, and then see if they'll hire you. Also, partner with others who are doing similar work. So if you know of performers who might be hired by entertainment industries, partner with them to also help educate the entertainment industry about your culture. Not just hire performers, but actually learn about the culture. In interviews, in the interview section, how serious are they, and will they let you guide the depiction? How much authority do they give you? Try to get that in writing as much as you can, because that's going to be key in what the end result of this project is. And then terms, or T's and C's, terms and conditions. Make sure that everything is in writing. And sad that we have to come to that point, because it also means in bringing lawyers in, but getting things in writing is going to really help for you later on when somebody says, no, we don't do it that way, and you can point back to the contract. And don't forget that escape clause in case they overrule you. So that's pretty much the end of my presentation. I'm available for any questions that you might have. And feel free to either put them in the chat or come off of microphone, and I'm happy to answer them for you. Also, culturaconnector.net is my website. So if you haven't already, please go over there and register, create a listing, fill out all the different fields so that you can be found by not just my clients, but clients from all over the world who are looking for cultural educators, performers, designers, linguists, you name it. And then there's also my contact information right up here, so that if you need to get a hold of me with a question, there you go. So thank you very much.